Alrighty. Hi, John. Here again with another indie creative entrepreneur story, and this time we've got Donna Parker with Butterfly Technique, and I know her actually through dancing tango, and we've known each other for a number of years on and off the dance floor. So it's my privilege to have her on and to talk about her journey from. Before we get into too much of that, and I understand that Donna is also talking about making a transition, some interesting things we'll talk about later on. Maybe you can share a little bit about like what lights you up in the morning. What is it that really kind of, you're excited about when you get up each day?
Well, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about that very same question this morning. In that we are designed to move, our bodies are designed to move. And so when you wake up, it's that transition between when we're actually physically quiet and when we actually start to awaken our bodies into movement. We are here to be in the real world and here to experience the sensations of the environment around us. And so it's that waking moment when I wake up and I think, man, I get to move today. I get to be in my body and I get to experience the sensation of feeling, touching, tasting, and exploring things. And every single morning I get up with this thought. Of course, then, you get all the things that you have to resolve every day. But I fully believe that we need to be moving and we need more platforms to get into movement.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That like it's something about the very physicalness that like really we lose in some ways and stuff. I often talk about that when I talk with tango dancers, that we somehow got disconnected along the way with our bodies, and I think we really need to just establish that again. Before we get more into you and tango dancing, maybe you could share a little bit about how tango dancing came into your life. Like, what was your connection? I know that just about every tango dancer has a story, so I would love to hear yours.
Awesome. Well, after I went through university, I was offered a position with the government, and I took a government traineeship, but it happened to be in Canberra, which is not where I'm from. So when I went to Canberra, obviously I didn't know anybody there, so I was looking for a social outlet. Now, I had dancing experience. I've been dancing since I could walk, but during a period of my life, I didn't move a hell of a lot. And that was a different phase of my life, but I was looking to socialize. So I happened to I learned salsa dancing first, actually, which is quite a common way for tango dancers to get into tango. And while I was there, I happened to meet a man, and he was a tango teacher. Now, he wasn't, he was a beautiful dancer. He was a very giving teacher, but he wasn't the type of tango dancer that you typically see actually in the tango world, where he was like, ta-da, here I am. He was quite an amazing guy. He still is quite an amazing guy. But he introduced me to tango, and I was, from the moment of the first experience I had, I was like, wow, this stuff exists. This is incredible. So, I actually also feel quite privileged to have an experience in tango which was understated, because I didn't have very many expectations when I went into tango. So I was in a community where there were very few teachers, and the teachers there didn't have a lot of knowledge. They just had the experiences that they had that they wanted to pass on. So we really had to figure out and find tango on our own. And once we actually started, my partner then at the time still runs actually a company called Tango in Canberra, and we started teaching together. And what we would do is any money we earned through classes, we would actually invest that into bringing international teachers into Canberra so that we could increase the community's knowledge and skills. And that was incredible. We met some amazing tango teachers and masters doing that. And we were always very grateful to have the experience. The tango community also had a social organisation that provided spaces for us to dance in. So we would teach classes, but we would send our students to the community in order to experience things. And we very much believe that tango was about the experience. It's about sharing that space with someone else and finding the sweet spot in the middle where the two individuals can come together and share themselves in something that becomes then a seamless interaction between two people. And so I've been privileged to have had that expectation in the beginning. So learning tango for me was very different to how a lot of other people learn. And I very much teach this way.
That's awesome. It sounds like that, even though it was a relatively small community, everyone kind of seemed to work in some sort of a harmony. Because what I found, like, it's been my experience when I visited small communities and stuff, is that there tends to be more competition, and that like people tend to kind of like scrabble for like the pieces of the pie, so to speak, and stuff. But it sounds like you had a community that like the people worked together. And were there other people like other than your teacher that like you found influential that like kind of really, encouraged you on your journey?
Well, it's interesting you asked that. Just firstly, what you talked about the community. We did have some members of the community who were trying to teach who did have that there's only a limited size of the pie mentality. And so what they would do is they would try to pilfer students from the different bodies. We actually actively chose to take a different approach. And that's, in my experience now that I've taught around Australia, is a very unusual approach in the tango world. So I agree with you, John, that actually happens around the tango scene generally. And it's a bit of a challenge because what I've experienced is beginners come in and they just want to experience tango. They just want to experience tango. Yeah. And in the beginning, they just want to experience quintessentially what tango is. And you can do this within half an hour, really, to give them the understanding of what it is at the fundamental level. But unfortunately, what sometimes happens is that the teachers do have that mentality where they want to make a living out of it. Let's face it. You want to work, you want to get some recompensation for that. But what ends up happening is then they start to fear that maybe they're not good enough, or maybe that nobody wants to buy their product. And so they tend to start to have that kind of, I need to grab whoever I can grab. And the easiest targets are the ones who are already sold on tango. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that from a community perspective, this is counterproductive. So we just had the mentality of we just wanted to share the love with whoever wanted to listen. If someone came to us from other students, other teachers, we would welcome them, but we weren't actively looking for already tango dancers. We were looking for people who hadn't exposed themselves to tango. And we did that specifically because we did understand that was the best use of our energy. Also because we both had day jobs, so we didn't rely on it for money. Yeah. So it was in many ways a hobby business that tend to become much more successful. And when I moved to Melbourne, I actually then started Tango Butterfly. So that community idea is very different. In terms of influential people, oh, wow, there's so many incredible teachers. I do have an ethos where I believe that interacting with any teacher is worth your time. What's important is that you're getting out there and experiencing it. There is no capacity that any soul has to have all of the knowledge of tango inside them. It's a much bigger beast than any single human being. So I've learned from some amazing and incredible teachers. Probably some of the most influential teachers for me personally, and you guys have them in the US, is Annabella Diaz-Hojman and Mario Consigliere. For me, early on, they were very gracious with their time and their energy with us, and they do come to Australia regularly. Cecilia Gonzalez as well, beautiful, amazing teacher. She really comes from the heart. She's very student focused and she wants to facilitate you. And so from a teaching perspective, she's actually very incredible and very nurturing. So, but also Danielle Nacuccio and Christina Sosas, amazing, beautiful dancers, beautiful souls, really very giving. So, we're quite isolated in Australia. So we learn from whoever comes in. And always the teachers that really have that mentality of willing to give always do very well in Australia.
Yeah, I think it's really about, like you said, the willingness to give that really comes across with students and stuff. And I think it's really a thing that like a lot of teachers will have the attitude of like that, it's all about like the one lesson they sell or this package or something like that. And I think the students can tell a difference when the teacher's really there to give, to just really provide an environment, if you will, also for like nurturing the learning and stuff. So as you've kind of grown and evolved yourself as a dancer, it seems like you've kind of gotten more into movement arts and I know that, as you mentioned, Cecilia Gonzalez, that's also what she's incorporated more into her teaching and stuff. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. There are so many forms of tango. And when a person first walks into a tango class, they don't understand this. They don't understand that it is over a century-old dance and that it has a historical progression just like any other dance. So, I personally made it my mission to learn a number of different styles of tango because I wanted to understand what quintessentially made them tango. Also because when people came into my classroom, I wanted to give them a fundamental knowledge so that when they went into social dancing in the Milonga longer space where they actually don't know the level or the standard or the style of the person they're dancing with, they could find the sweet spot in the middle and know what mattered in the social environment and what didn't. Because let's face it, a lot of the teachers that come around and tour the world, they have a particular brand and product and a particular focus of their style of tango. And that's beautiful. It's amazing that they're doing that. But if we confuse that with being the only way to dance tango, then this becomes problematic in the social environment where there's so many different styles of and ways to experience tango. So the one thing I really love about Cecilia Gonzalez, and I started to bring into my practice, was I wanted to make tango an opportunity for, firstly, someone to be able to connect with their own body. Because if you can't own your own energetic space, if you don't know how to find your own balance and how to own your physical space, then essentially your experience of tango is significantly lessened. So owning your own body and knowing where it fits in space and time and how that works and how you can use it as a vehicle for movement is quintessential for an experience, a successful experience in tango. The other thing that she does that I really love is that she also respects that there's an energy flow, a conversation that happens between a couple. So some of the older forms of tango believe that we have a leader and a follower, and the follower is relatively passive, and the leader physically picks up the follower and moves her. Yeah. Now, this is an old-fashioned way of dancing tango. It's not necessarily wrong, but what I found is that when I experience a dance with someone who leads me that way, my satisfaction level is significantly lessened because I can't bring myself into the experience. I can't actually explore that with someone else. So the beautiful thing I really like about, for example, Noelia and Carlitos, who are incredible dancers, they've really brought in Virginia Pandolfi, also same thing. She's really empowered the woman in the space of dancing, in that she's teaching the woman to own their own space, to hold their own posture, and to actually do this in a way that's biomechanically sound for their body so that they can free up movement and they can actually contribute themselves into the dance. And to train the leaders to have a feedback mechanism. So instead of pushing the lady through an open door, they actually open the door and allow her to feel the invitation to step through the door. And when she steps through the door, they follow her through the door. Yeah. But then they actually need to open the next door and then open the next door. So there ends up being this revolving door opening sensation that the leaders are opening these suggestions. And then they're respecting the fact that when the woman steps through the door, she creates an energetic imprint that needs to feed back into the next door opening. So we end up with this cyclic energy that happens between the couple. And so to some extent, the leaders have to follow in order to lead, and the followers have to lead in order to follow. And these types of concepts are amazing and incredible, and they're amazing for your brain.
Yeah, I think that's what's, like you've just thrown out so many truth bombs and so many different layers of tango. And I think that's one of the things that's fascinating to me about tango is just that there's the parts that people see and those, visual parts and stuff like that. And that's what probably like most people think of tango as, like kind of when they watch Forever Tango or a movie and stuff like that, that they think that that's tango and stuff. But then there's all these aspects of social tango. Can you talk a little bit about like what to you is like, how do you divide that difference between the entertainment, the kind of show tango, and then a social tango? What to you like kind of makes it more of this of a social dance?
Awesome. Well, in order to answer that, I'll go back to how I feel about watching dancing, because when I actually sit back and I watch someone perform dancing, I actually can't focus a hell of a lot. And that's because when I watch someone dancing, I actually would rather be dancing. Yeah. Now, when you're actually looking at social dancing, the people who are dancing for themselves. They're dancing for the experience. And so while it looks nice and harmonious and you can respect good dancers, they're dancing for each other. And that's the quintessential focus. If they care about what they look like, it probably feels like really bad. It really doesn't feel that great. Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that it feels nice in social dancing. And who cares if it looks nice? Usually it happens to look nice. Whereas when we're looking at exhibition, and we're looking at the exhibitions that are done by professional dancers in a milonga space, they're still doing social tango kind of, but they're also demonstrating some of their respect for the history of tango, their respect for the music, but also the respect for some of the ideas of tango. So they might add layers of styling on top of the way that they dance, also because part of it is also to demonstrate their aptitude and skill, but also to demonstrate how the exploration of tango. They're exploring tango in a way that doesn't restrict space. Now, we know that when we're in a milonga and there's like 200 people on the floor and you can hardly move, and the person in front of you is not moving, you actually start to improvise according to the dance floor. Yeah. When you're performing, there's no restriction like that. So you're going to choose different ways of dancing. Also, choreography in terms of, if we're looking at it in terms of the mentality, when you're performing choreography, it's a different part of your brain. Yeah, you're actually remembering movement and you're executing movement according to something that you've already come up with. Whereas with social dancing, it should be instantaneous decision making. Yeah, and this is why social tango has this incredible. There's research to show that when a couple dances tango together, their brains harmonize. The brainwaves harmonize. Yeah, they did this in New York. There's all this other research actually to show how amazing tango is for brain health and memory and concentration and focus and a whole lot of other stuff. There's even research to show that tango is great for people who suffer from Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and dementia, again, because of the way the brain works. So they're very different things. Stage tango, of course, is about seeing it. It's about the audience. So, in fact, it's interesting you say that this. Last night I was watching on ABC. We have ABC here. There was a documentary of dancing on film. Yeah. Oh. And they were actually, choreographers were talking about how it was obviously a genre that they did, because in choreographing, making a choreography for film, you have a very different approach to when you're actually in, sorry, you've frozen, John.
Sorry, it looks like we froze for a second there. That's one of the downsides of Lab.
It's all good. So it's the same. The difference between social tango and stage tango, they're almost completely different dances.
Yeah, there's definitely, like you said, the key aspects of who it's for, stuff like that. In fact, an Argentine teacher that when he was teaching us the differences, the actual physical way to dance differently and stuff, was the idea of that you would have essentially a third person in the embrace and stuff, and that was the audience, and that was who you dance a little bit more open and to basically invite the audience in, versus the social dance is more intimate and it's more, the embrace is strictly between the following the leader, the partners and stuff. So that's another kind of more visual way of like kind of explaining some of the things that you just said and stuff. I guess the other thing that I find is that we have this kind of journey that we progress and stuff like that. And I feel that along the way that like our ideas of tango change and stuff. And then so it seems like you kind of shifted more to the different things about the elements underneath it, about energy, about connecting, about movement. So what was it that led you to this revelation? What was it that kind of started you on that, journey and stuff?
I'm so glad you asked that, actually, because I was also asking myself the same thing. I think it's because when I first started tango, we didn't really have any teachers to guide us in any particular way. So we really had to take what we naturally felt would happen. I also have a contemporary dance background, and I have a whole range of different styles of dancing. And so what I experienced is when we had international teachers and they would invite me to dance, I would just have to cope. I had no teacher teaching me how to do particular things. So I literally got this idea that as a follower, as long as I swung my leg under my bottom so I didn't fall on it, I would be fine. And what I discovered through that experience is that I had to take the energy where I got it, and I just had to go with it. I just had to release my movement and stop thinking about it and stop trying to understand it. And so from that, as I started to teach, I found that the more I started to talk about this stuff, the more people who otherwise wouldn't have stayed with tango started to stay with tango. So, and I'll qualify that because I have had this discussion with a friend of mine, and I will mention his name, Mello. I've worked with Mello here in Australia, and I love working with him. He has a very particular energy, and we do work quite well in the classroom together. Different ends of spectrums, but beautiful dancer.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And we had this discussion because he said that not everybody can dance tango. And I completely 100% disagree with this, and he'll probably kill me for having this conversation with you. But I honestly believe that every single soul can reach Tango as long as it's been delivered in a way that they understand. Now, that sounds more complicated than it is, but if you talk back down, if we bring Tango back to its basics and understand that it's literally transferring your weight from your left to your right, and then just connecting the energy through an embrace. And I talk about a fluid embrace. Obviously, there are a variety of forms of embrace. But ultimately, from there, what I found is that a person can actually connect into themselves and actually feel the weight in their feet. And then they can actually tactile feel how the energy shifts in the hands and the energy shifts in the contact points. And then from there, they actually get a level of experience of Tango. And then from there, you can actually compile a whole lot of styling on top of that. And most of them can dance a level of Tango. Now, obviously, not all Tango dancers are going to aspire to be greats, you know. Not everybody's going to be a Pablo Veron, to use the movie's vernacular. But some people will, you know, but that takes training, and not everybody wants that. You know, some people really, in fact, I had this conversation with someone in Buenos Aires, someone who was living in Buenos Aires, and he actually said to me that the everyday, the day-to-day stuff for them was so difficult for them that they wanted to head into a mid-longer space in order to feel a connection that they didn't get in the outside world. And at the end of the day, they just wanted that. And some people, for some people, that's connecting with the music. For some people, it's holding someone else and just being okay with holding someone else. And for some people, it's just being able to move freely and to invest themselves into something that actually contributes to something else. And Tango offers this 100% everywhere, in any space, and everybody can reach this. Even babies can reach this.
Yeah, I mean, that was really for us. This, I don't know how much you know about Cell Space. That was in the Bay Area. We basically started this event, a weekly event, and it was really at that time unheard of. The idea of dancing to more contemporary music. We had everything from like Pink Floyd to Metallica, you name it, you know, like we did. It was a crazy experiment, and the idea of it was though to make it Tango more accessible. And we had like where initially like it was just voluntary cover, like you could go in, like if you paid $0, we still wouldn't kick. We would welcome everybody. Like ultimately we ended up making it $5. Big jump, right? But still, it was just the idea though of making it more accessible. That like, you know, because what I experienced when I started dancing Tango was it was this very rigid dance that like you had to go to expensive classes and pay $10-15 to just basically, you know, have people to not dance, because like a lot of times because you were starting out, you were turned down, or like, you know, it was just a very dejected, you know, very harsh experience when you start out. And we wanted to do just the total opposite, make it very friendly. We had like, you know, people that, you know, like after they got certain point, we welcomed people to kind of contribute, to be volunteer teachers, and just basically build a community around just that simple idea of like you said, that like everybody can dance. It's not as though that like everyone will dance, and not as though everyone will dance, like you said, at a level of a Pablo Ron or any of the, you know, maestros and stuff. And that wasn't the point though. The point was connecting with each other and like having this sense of like community, and to just basically, you know, be back in their bodies. And it was a beautiful experiment, and I've talked about it other times. I don't want to talk too much more about it, but it was. I just felt the need to share though that like, you know, like I totally get what you mean, and I totally agree that like as much as I love Nate as well stuff, I have to admit that like I disagree with the opinion that not everyone can dance. You know, I think not everyone will dance. I agree with that, you know, but I think we can all do it. We all have to, if we have a body that we can, and there's even people who, there's actually an amputee lady in our area that dances. And I'm sure that like, you know, if they figure out a way, then you can have people in wheelchairs, you know, like kind of dancing tango and stuff. It's just the thing of like, it's more, like you said, about connection, about finding that connection and stuff. And I think that's part of what I feel is the fascinating part about the Tango journey, is to figure out how you can connect with somebody in a physical, present way and stuff. Sorry, I digressed quite a bit there, and I appreciate you kind of bearing with me for that.
No, that's perfectly fine, perfectly fine. You know, there are a few things that actually come out from that. First, and I'm glad you raised that, because when I was having my shower before, I actually had that conversation with myself. that it's interesting that just like life, tango is always a good analogy for life. Students and people who are experiencing tango go through phases. You know, they start in their infancy and they go through as teenagers, and then they go through to be more experienced adults. And just like adults, we get to choose our pathway. We get to choose what style we want to head towards and how we interrogate that experience. In the beginning, let's face it, I love tango music. There's nothing I love more than dancing to golden age tango. Even earlier, Canaro, oh my God, like, kill me now. I love it. but certain experiences I would have with certain things. So sometimes dancing with a beginner is easier than dancing with someone who considers themselves experienced. And partially that's because the beginner doesn't have ideas of what tango is and what tango isn't enough to cut off my options. So if we see that dancing or dancing together with someone is a choice we both make as individuals, we need to be open to people who want to say no to us and people who want to say yes to us when we're inviting them, but also when we're being invited. We need to be okay with saying, yes, I want to dance with you. No, I don't want to dance with you. We also need to be okay with the fact that there are 1,000,001 reasons why we might not want to dance with someone. You know, either I'm sore because I've just spent the last 5 tanders dancing with a whole lot of people and I really need to rest now. The music might not make me feel like I want to dance. Or conversely, it might be that, and I speak from personal experience, I suffer from fibromyalgia. So what that means is that sometimes I actually can't dance with someone who's not aware of their physical volume or the energy that they use when they dance. And so sometimes I'll say no because I actually need to make sure that my physical body is rested and is considered. So it's actually always a choice that we as individuals make who we dance with and how we interrogate the dance. I don't care how people get to tango. All I care is that they get there, whether they're dancing to Metallica or they're dancing to Desali. I just really want them to do that. And then I want them to know that they have choices to experience tango, how they choose to experience it. And if everybody had this experience, there would be more than enough work for the teachers that are touring the world. People would be more inclined to go to workshops and pay to learn tango. Because what happens at the moment, I've experienced this around the world, I believe that this is similar, is that a lot of teachers are still fighting for their piece of the pie. And so they're fighting over students and the students pick up on this and they don't stay in tango. And the students are being shown in the beginning that tango is about learning about it as much as experiencing about it. So because of that, they do, you know, a 10-week course and then they're like, I'm an advanced person. I can walk up to a Milonga and I can just ask the advanced Ferraris and I can just drive them because, you know, they're a fast car. And I'm like, no, if you want to dance with a Ferrari, you need to show the respect of training how to learning how to actually drive a Ferrari, because a Ferrari has a very subtle way of being handled. And so with the advanced leaders and followers, it's the same. They've trained to get to their advanced level. So if you've done a 10-week course, then it's a little bit unreasonable for you to expect to drive the Ferrari without there being some damage to the Ferrari. Yeah. And so again, it's just about respect and understanding that we're all there as individuals choosing our experience and we're interacting according to the opportunities offered to us and whether it's right for us at the time. And if everybody respects that, then we would be less upset with our own experience of tango and less inclined to leave it.
Yeah, I totally agree with the idea of that, you know, along with the respect is also the idea of that, you know, people will progress if you allow and for that matter, welcome them into the community. And so that was a little bit more about, you know, our experience and stuff was that, you know, what we found was that at first we just basically grew, you know, like exponentially and stuff like that. And then after a while, this is something I found was really interesting was because of our approach, there were people that went to our events that didn't go to any other events, you know, that of any of the other teachers and stuff. So in other words, we were not only not competing for the same, you know, piece of the same pie, we were competing for a totally different pie, you know. So, and I think that's sometimes what teachers don't see is the possibility of that. Like if you had a different approach, maybe what it is you will attract a whole different audience and stuff. And that's something that I think, you know, like where a lot of times people don't see that because of the fact that like they think it's, oh, just, you know, the world of people that possibly could dance tango and stuff like that, and or the audience. I'm totally with you about like the possibilities of growing it worldwide and like being a second or third renaissance of tango that I feel is still, you know, coming. Well, without going too much more about tango per se and stuff like that, in terms of your own journey, and like, was there certain moments though that like you really questioned, like kind of, not only dancing tango but also like as an entrepreneur, like kind of what you were doing, and like kind of, can you take us to like some kind of moment where you really started thinking or having second doubts?
Um, I'll mention the obvious. In so much as I work alone, Tango Butterfly has really just been me, and Tango is a dance for two. So the frustration really has been finding a running mate, finding someone who wants to explore and interact, who actually has a knowledge of Tango. There, in Australia, we do have quite a small pond, and so the level of dancers tends to, like the higher level. Firstly, there is a very big gap between the really good dancers and everybody else. A massive gap, yeah. And there seems to be some reason why people don't easily get up to the top. I could postulate as to why that is, but I don't think I'll do that here, just for the record. But what I found is that there are a couple of quite outstanding leaders in Melbourne and in Australia, but most of them really don't want to teach for a variety of reasons. Also because part of the reason why they've gotten to the level that they have is because they're beautiful dancers, and being a beautiful dancer doesn't make you a great teacher necessarily. Yeah. So I really had a lot of difficulty trying to find someone who I could work with where the resonance was good. Also because, again, we don't really have a whole lot of skills here. I've again been fortunate to learn from some incredible dancers, and I've been around the world and studied in Buenos Aires. So I've learned some amazing things from there. The other thing is also that mentality in the community here about there only being a limited amount of students. The challenge again with that is that if we don't have a new flux of new students constantly coming into the community, then the freshness goes out of the social environment, and so it ends up being quite stale. And so that's been a challenge because, of course, it's a challenge to. I love teaching beginners, for the record. It's my favorite class, actually, is teaching them their very first tango class. But I'm a rarity. Most other teachers prefer to teach someone who's already had experience. So they market themselves as that level teachers, and of course there's no new students coming through, and so that's been a challenge. Also there's just been there is a lot of ego. There's really a lot of ego around here again, and in the entrepreneur game, because obviously I have some other businesses that I've experienced, and I've been in different work environments. Ego is just a business killer. It's a business killer because ego is always linked to the fear, is linked to a fear that we don't actually have the skills that we need, and we don't actually have the funds that we need. So what happens is we start to make decisions based on our ego and managing that fear. And that's actually counterproductive, I've found. We really often need to invest our time and our energy into the other spaces, the spaces where nobody wants to go. And ideally, as an entrepreneur, that's where we want to be. And if I continued with Tango Butterfly as my sole company, I would invest a little bit more in that space. I'm quite comfortable with that.
So what made you, what's the shift to what you're doing now? Can you talk a little bit about what's you have in the works?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the butterfly technique is my new business model. It's a movement therapy. It's based upon the lessons I learned in tango, but also because 8 years ago I suffered a workplace injury that left me on my back for about a year, not being able to use my hands.
Wow.
And it was quite life-changing for me. You can imagine that when I have a very busy brain, so I like to interrogate a whole lot of stuff. I couldn't even hold a book to read. There were days I couldn't feed myself. So I'm not the type to sit and wallow about that. But my experience of that, and interestingly enough, I learned to dance tango without arms. Which you can do technically.
Wow.
But what I actually learned is a whole lot about the way the body worked. I realized that I wasn't taking responsibility for aspects of my physical health that I should have, and I allowed the modern way of working, which we all suffer, to shape my posture and shape my energy output. So I was basically spending 60 hours a week at an office with a high workload. I had staff, and our electronic world means that we spend most of our time sitting down and not moving. And I mean, it has shown that this is one of the it's the new smoking. Sitting apparently is the new smoking.
Mm.
But
Wow.
fibromyalgia, which is what I have, is also the fastest growing autoimmune disease currently in the modern world.
Mm.
It's very similar to chronic fatigue syndrome. So what I've discovered through my own process of trying to rebuild my nervous system and reconnect with my physical body, I actually took some of my Tango knowledge and rebuilt that in my system. I also studied Pilates, which is also thereapy-based therapy, and
Mm.
I trained to be a Pilates instructor because I was fascinated with how that worked, and I learned a hell of a lot more about the neurological, there's stuff that's happening neurologically in the body when we move. So I was doing that on the side, plus experiencing my own Tango. I did stop teaching for about a year before I started Tango Butterfly. And when I started teaching Tango Butterfly, I found because in my private life I was learning all this stuff about my body and how to rebuild my nervous system, I was pulling this knowledge into my Tango classes. So at the end of the day, some of the stuff that I would bring into the Tango classes were more about building the neurological connection and using Tango as a vehicle to do this. So I had all of these students who I love and I still love. I wish I could see them more, to be honest, because they're very giving. They give me a lot back. But their feedback was that they were sleeping better. They were starting to feel energetically more focused and more able to get into their own lives. I had a friend of mine who suffers from extraordinary anxiety, depression, and she found that Tango actually allowed her to be in the moment for the first time and actually to start feeling like she could be in her own space and be safe in being in her own space. So we built and I started to organically bring in some of these things with individuals according to what felt they actually needed. And most of the feedback I was getting was, wow, this is incredible for me. My life is getting better because of this one experience of a Tango class. So it was that experience where I realized there are a lot of people come to Tango because they want to meet people. And I totally get that. That's awesome. That's really great. But their expectations is very different to someone who's coming in because they can't sleep, or coming in because they're physically in pain all the time, or they really need the mindfulness practice. So I just found that the more I started progressing on this journey of healing myself, the more I brought this into my Tango classes, and the more feedback I got from people to say, hey, you're onto something. So the butterfly technique really is the product of that environment. It's a movement meditation, if you will, but it builds on the research relating to meditation and how good that is for the brain, because I also now facilitate meditation for other people. It also works on your autonomic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response, which research shows that the fight or flight response is responsible for 95% of all illness and disease around the world.
Wow.
All illness and disease. It also, the research around Tango I mentioned before about the harmonized brains that happen when we dance Tango, but also there's been some research here in Melbourne around Tango and Parkinson's affected people, and it shows that Tango is significantly more effective at managing Parkinson's symptoms than things like acupuncture or physiotherapy. Even they actually showed physiotherapy was less effective than Tango at managing Parkinson's tremors. There was research in Sydney, that also showed that Tango was more effective than meditation for people who are suffering from depression and anxiety-related disorders. So it does back on some research. I've been, and this is, I guess, the entrepreneur story. I'm trying to get used to the idea that I need to be telling people about my year of being on my back and not being able to use my arms, because truthfully, John, that period of my life I didn't talk to anybody about. I was suffering a lot, including mental health. It was a very trying time for me, and even now, you see, I'm getting teary now. It was life-changing, but also life-affecting, and I need to tell people that this is a growing issue. Fibromyalgia is a growing issue, and it's not the only issue that's come about because of our sedentary-based electronic lifestyle. Yeah. Also, that we're looking at therapies at the moment that really aren't rebuilding the nervous system. They're really not reconnecting our bodies through movement. So we're tackling either the body isolated or the brain isolated, but we're not actually there's no therapy that builds the two together. We're also designed to be social. Our bodies, our physiological bodies, actually respond differently around people. And so even if you did all of this therapy work by yourself, as soon as you're around other people, there's something that happens with us where we give away our energy. And so I have experienced where I teach tango and we put a particular intention to the lesson plan where the person learns how to hold their energetic space when they're around other people. And this is really important. This is really empowering because it means that things like chronic fatigue and things like fibromyalgia are less likely to manifest in people's lives. So ideally, any person, and this therapy will be perfect for any person who spends or longer than an hour sitting on their butts every day, they're really going to benefit from this therapy. And so I really hope that the people who are interested in what I have to say and the exercises I want to give to people, I really hope that they'll find me and they'll be interested in learning a little bit about themselves. Because at the end of the day, the therapy really is about empowering them to understand how their bodies work, understand how their bodies feel, and understand how they can use this in a shared space with other people.
Yeah, there's again, like I feel like each time there's just a tremendous amount of things that I want to make sure that we kind of highlight and share and stuff. One of the key things that what came to mind as you were saying some of these ideas was how traditional medicine is about like if you have some kind of problem, take a pill or to just, cut it out with surgery and stuff. And I absolutely agree that like there's so many other things that aren't being taken care of in the root of it because our bodies and the connections of our bodies, our minds aren't being nurtured. And I think that like, as you said, that like there's these different modalities that like now we're only starting to understand that, it's not just some kind of, pseudoscience and stuff. There's real scientific basis to what is going on. And it's great to see that this research is coming to life. And just hearing your own personal, like, thank you for sharing that, your own personal journey and stuff. It's incredible, like kind of just, because I mean, just from somebody who wasn't able to even get up and stuff like that to somebody who's, like dancing tango. I mean, that in itself is like speaks volumes to just that this stuff is real. I mean, you can't argue around that and stuff. And so I guess the only thing that I feel I can really add to it is just basically when somebody who is like just struggling, just like they're trying to find their way and stuff like that with whether it's tango or the entrepreneur's journey and stuff, what would some things that you would share that like you've learned along the way that's really kind of helped you to kind of keep going?
I guess, and this is where we get serious, John. At the end of the day, I honestly believe that each person knows their own truth. They understand their strengths as a human being and their weaknesses. What we tend to do, and research shows, that we do have a tendency to focus on all the things that are wrong with us. Our brains habitually seek all the problems. And so almost from the moment we wake up, we're almost running the list of all the problems to solve in our minds. And what this does is energetically it shuts us down and it actually prevents us from going out into the world and building the networks and the relationships we actually need in order to get the things that we have to offer this world out into the public and get it known. And the thing is that we're so afraid. We're so afraid to put ourselves out there, and we're so afraid to say, hey, this is who I am. I have something to offer you. If you want it, here I am. And then let people come to you. What happens is that we sit in our homes and we sit in our ivory towers and we have these great ideas, but we don't share them with anybody. We don't share them with anybody. Or if we do, they kind of blur out like we've got some vendetta against the world, and nobody's listening. But let's face it, nobody's listening because we're not putting the messages out there. So it does come down to trust. It does come down to almost a faith that you actually do know why you're here and you actually do know what you have to offer this world. And just being clear-sighted in the fact that if you just hold steady and hold your direction, that things will actually work out. What we tend to do is we go, okay, I have this product and this is how it's going to work out. And we then build all these boxes to tick that head along the pathway. But the thing is that might not actually be the pathway that is open to us. So sometimes we also need to be open. So we don't just need to be faithful to ourselves and trust that we have a message that's worth pushing out there, but also understand that the journey is not always straight. The journey is not always without hurdles. And as long as we just keep the faith in ourselves and what our message is, that we just need to tie that back and understand that fear's a natural part of the way that's our primitive inheritance, actually. It's our primitive brain trying to make it in the modern world. So just have trust. you know, if you have a message, that really comes out in the way that you vibrate, in the way that you present yourself. So
awesome, Dana. Yeah, what's the best way for folks to find out about what you're working on and learn more about you and to connect with you?
Awesome. Well, I have Tango Butterfly. Tango Butterfly has all the Tango information so far. The butterfly technique, I'm building an online platform at the moment. It should be up soon, hopefully. So that would be at thebutterflytechnique.com. Also through Facebook and through Twitter, I also have an account under the Butterfly Technique and also Tango Butterfly. So please email me any questions and comments. I absolutely want dialogues around these issues. So if there's anybody who wants to talk about something or is interested in having a conversation about classes, how they're structured, or even wants to interact with some online conversations like we are here today, John, that would be really awesome. I'd really love that.
Definitely. Thanks, Donna. We're going to stop the recording now.